Hello and welcome to Penguin Classics on Air. This is Elda Rotor, Editorial Director of Penguin Classics. Today's program is called Why We Love Jane Austen. Juliette Wells, the enriched ebook features editor for Pride and Prejudice, is Associate Professor of English at Manhattan Phil College and received her PhD from Yale University. She is the author of numerous articles on Austen's novels and their cultural legacy, and is working on a book about Austen in contemporary culture, Everybody's Jane, Austen in the Popular Imagination. Juliette is here today to talk with Penguin Classics about Austenmania among academics, what it means to be a Janeite, and Pride and Prejudice and zombies. In this program, Why We Love Jane Austen. First, let's talk about why students love Jane Austen. What novels do you teach, and what seems to be the most popular among your students?
My students are like most other readers of Jane Austen that I've ever talked to, in that they like Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion the best. And they like Northanger Abbey, especially if I sell them on it. And they have a much harder time with Mansfield Park and Sense and Sensibility, even though in a lot of cases they love the film version of Sense and Sensibility, and that helps them with the book.
Are there certain elements of these books or themes that really click best with students?
I think students, again, like general readers, find a lot to interest them in Austen's novels. The centrality of the heroine, interesting female characters who don't necessarily measure up to exactly what their culture told them an ideal woman was supposed to be. There are certainly romantic heroes in many of the novels, not necessarily exactly the kinds of characters that my students would imagine themselves falling in love with, but they're attracted to the integrity of the characters, and they're attracted to the level of thoughtful interest that those heroes show in Austen's heroines. And then many of Austen's heroines come from what we would call dysfunctional families, or at least families where there are parents not doing their parental job all that well, or bizarre siblings, or other universal aspects of the human experience that resonate with students themselves.
Is there any struggle getting students interested in Austen, or will she be a perennial favorite?
There's such a huge advantage now with all the film adaptations about Austen and a lot of popular fiction derived from her works, that students come in knowing about Austen, even if they haven't read Austen, and they're curious. They want to know more. They want to go back to the books. And the other authors that I love very much and teach, such as Charlotte Bronte and George Eliot, just don't come with that kind of advantage built in.
Are there any similarities between the appeal for Austen's work and other books your students enjoy?
Most of the students in my classes happen to be women, and most of the English majors at my college happen to be women, and so they're always drawn to books that feature strong and interesting women characters, and so many English novels in particular do that. What sets Austen's novels apart from other novels in the English language tradition is that they're so witty and funny, and that you don't have to read all the footnotes and be really prepared with historical and political and social context, illuminating though that is, in order to get the jokes and to understand, beyond just the jokes, the level of irony that Austen brings to her depiction of the world. And I think the students value that, and it seems grown up to them to look at the world that way.
Do you find that Austen's novels appeal more to female students than male ones?
I think it can be a challenge to get certain male students into the novels. I remember teaching Northanger Abbey once to a class of freshmen, and the guys complained that nothing happened and people just got in and out of carriages, and you had to persuade them that there was action happening there on another level. Although I was talking to someone after a conference on Austen recently, and she mentioned that her daughter raised her son reading aloud to him Austen's novels and also Tolkien's novels. They alternated. And now he's a 15-year-old basketball player, and he's read all of Austen's novels himself, and he loves them, and he's getting his basketball player friends to read them too. And so I think especially among the younger generation, there might be less of a gender divide than you might think.
Do today's students approach Austen and appreciate Austen as older readers do, or do you see a generational difference?
I do definitely see a generational difference, and it doesn't lie so much in how the students think about Austen's novels, but in how they think about the idea of Austen that films and other works of fiction and nonfiction contribute to. My students are likely to have seen a couple of film adaptations. In some cases, they've watched Clueless a million times and can recite the script from memory. And so they're coming to Jane Austen thinking of her novels already as being a part of our popular culture. And this doesn't intimidate them, and it doesn't turn them off. They like the idea that something that they would encounter in a college classroom that is great literature that is a Penguin classic would also be something that they would want to read on their own or pass to their friends in the dorm. And I think in contrast, a lot of older readers, more established scholars, are maybe a little bit turned off by what they see as the commercialization of Austen, taking Austen into realms where they might prefer that Austen not go.
So let's talk about why Janeites love Jane Austen. What is a Janeite, and are you a member?
A Janeite is a term that's been used for nearly a century, for more than a century, to describe aficionados of Jane Austen's writings, what we would now call fans of Jane Austen. And at different times and in different places, it has been a pejorative term. You might call somebody a Janeite if you felt that that person was reading Jane Austen's writings in a particular way that was different than how you thought they ought to be read. Or you might call yourself a Janeite out of pride if you are marking yourself as a fan of Austen, wanting to take that name. It's interesting that other fans of other authors don't have a kind of catchy term for themselves. We take Jane Austen's first name. It's not Austenite, but Janeite, to think of a particular kind of familiarity or intimacy with her. I wouldn't say that I'm a Janeite, mostly because I teach Austen, I write in a scholarly way about Austen. I'm also involved in the Jane Austen Society of North America, which is an organization of Austen aficionados, many of whom, but not all, would call themselves Janeites.
What kind of activities do Janeites enjoy?
They really love getting together and talking about Jane Austen's novels, which many of them reread very frequently and regularly. They enjoy talking about recent film adaptations, even if talking about them in that case means commenting on how grossly inaccurate they are or seem to be. Many lovers of Jane Austen's novels also enjoy taking part in activities that Austen herself would have taken part in or her characters would have. So they perhaps enjoy dressing up in Regency costume, or they enjoy taking part in Regency dances. And then, of course, anyone who loves Jane Austen's novels becomes curious, at least at some level, about the places that she lived and the places that she used as settings for her novels. And so people who are able to travel to England and visit the house that she lived in, visit the city of Bath, where two of her novels take place, can deepen their appreciation of the novels and their sense of closeness to Austen through that form of pilgrimage.
Are there favorite Austen film adaptations recommended by Janeites?
Everybody has a different favorite up to a point, and some folks don't like film adaptations at all. Some really, really prefer to stay with the original text. I would say the 1995 version of Pride and Prejudice that was done by the BBC and then aired in the U.S. on A&E that stars Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy and Jennifer Ely as Elizabeth Bennet is the runaway favorite of Austen lovers. And that miniseries is responsible for sparking a lot of the adaptations of Austen's novels that came afterwards. Other film adaptations that Janeites like and appreciate include the mid-90s version of Persuasion that starred Amanda Root and Ciarán Hinds. That is often held up as a nearly perfect screen adaptation of a novel. And then there's a bit of a generational divide here, too, because younger viewers and readers tend to like very much the 2005 feature film version of Pride and Prejudice that starred Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen that Joe Wright directed. But I have yet to find an older Austen fan who prefers that version or even likes it very much.